I know something that we could talk about. I saw some discussion the other day about editing, because Brian Niemeyer.
I have him muted.
Well, your post the other day about how do we get rid of the indie stigma?
Oh yeah.
I was looking at a bunch of people that I don't usually look at.
Yeah.
And I saw some of them were quote tweeting it. Brian Niemeyer had quote tweeted you on that and said quality editing.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I agree with. But some other people were talking about it, and they mentioned the cost.
Yeah.
And he said, this was from him.
Yeah.
So somebody else was talking about his prices, and then he said he charges $1,000 just for developmental editing.
Yikes.
But in his tweet he said something like, you know, and it weeds out people who don't see the value of that.
Sure.
And then he said something like, and it's worth it. And what I wanted to talk about or just say is that, you know, the worker deserves their wage. Brian Niemeyer, I believe, is a good writer, good editor, and he's providing a service, and that's probably what that's worth. You know, you spend a few hours on something like that, easily it's gonna be worth that much money. But I think that he is incentivized to sell that to as many people as possible. That's fine. And we're kind of on record saying that people should be willing to pay money for their hobbies, even if there isn't necessarily going to be a return on it. Mm-hmm. But I think you have to be, in my opinion, you should be really careful about talking about saying something like it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid that aspiring, like people who aren't just writing as a hobby or a fun thing that they are not really concerned with making money at, are going to look at a statement like that and think, oh, by worth it, that means that if I don't get my book edited, then it's just never going to do anything. And if I do get my book edited by Brian Niemeyer for $1,000, then that means that it's going to take off and I'm going to make that money back.
Yeah.
And that, I'm sorry, but there's no guarantee there.
The worth it is not necessarily monetary return.
Yeah. And I'm sure that that's what he meant. But I feel like, you know, when I was first starting to write, I did a lot of stuff because I was kind of hoping that someday my writing would kind of take off. Even if it didn't take off to be something that could be like a full-time job, it would just take off enough that, you know, like I could say make a few $1,000s a year at it or something.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can understand the behavior of a lot of people, a lot of author types on Twitter, if you kind of assume that that's their goal too. Yeah. And I would just be really, I kind of feel bad for those people who think that that is going to work, because I don't think there's any guarantees.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, I think the way to take off, if what you want is your work to take off, is writing a lot of books. So if you think the standard of quality is I have to pay $1,000 to get each one edited, then all of a sudden, to take off, to have a series or multiple series, you're in the whole thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And you know, the more you spend, the more you have to make back to break even if your goal is making money. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a realistic goal for most people.
Yeah. I think that developmental editing can be helpful too. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people don't use it right. Does that make sense? I don't know. I think that maybe this is my personal Like, I think that developmental editing would be probably most useful much, much earlier in the process.
Yeah, almost like feedback on your general outline before you can start writing.
Yeah. Because otherwise you're just wasting a lot of time going in a direction that might not make as much sense in the end. But
Yeah.
like I understand that sometimes people use developmental editing just to mean like before copy editing, right? Like not sentence level but larger stuff. And to me, if you have a finished manuscript and you are and you as an author feel like you're pretty close to the end of the process, and I read it for developmental things, I'm gonna have maybe a half dozen things to say that are gonna be fixed by one or two paragraphs on your part, and I just
Well, that's how it was for my books.
Yeah.
Right? Basically, from the rough to the final draft of my books, it was taking a few paragraphs out. I think we rearranged the chapter splits a little bit, and both my books I rewrote the endings a little bit to make the main character a little bit more active in it. Rearranged a couple things to have more clear character arcs, but it was on the order of paragraphs. And again, like, I'm not saying that that's not worth $1,000 to have Brian Niemeyer do that for you, but or to give his suggestions. Like, it's valuable work to be able to do that correctly. But you know, I think probably some people think that you could fix like really big issues that way, and I don't know. And I know he's not he's a very opinionated guy, and if he thinks your book needs to be taken back to the drawing board, he'll say it. So I remember reading a blog post that Alexander Helene wrote a couple years ago. I think he was talking about like a vampire novel or something that he had, because Alexander Helene has a lot of novels that he's written that he hasn't published. He's a guy who would write like a novel every couple of years and never published them until he published Traitor to Dreams. And if I remember right, he had Brian Niemeyer edit that vampire novel, and Niemeyer told him basically, don't publish this.
I think I remember hearing about that, yeah.
I mean, think about that too, right? If you might pay somebody $1,000 and hear, don't put this out, and I kind of wonder about that.
Yeah.
You know, how useful is that? You know, what? Again, like if your goal is to make money, then what's your tolerance? How many books can you afford to write, money and time wise, that your editor of choice is going to just say, hey, don't put out?
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing that book doesn't have a lot of really good qualities to it.
Yeah. Well, I've seen Helene's writing, right? Like.
Yeah. So and I mean, again, like, I'm not saying that wasn't worth money. I'm not saying Niemeyer's entitled to his opinion.
Right.
But I feel like people who are just getting into this might be in for a rude awakening if they start spending this money and trying to publish and then having it not work.
Yeah.
And what I would like, I would like to see more people do this. I would like to see quality products get put out, but I would also like to see people not burn out.
Yeah.
I would like to see people put out things that don't necessarily have like a clear financial case.
Yep.
Right. That's another thing is I think if the editor is sort of business minded, which I think Niemeyer is, they're probably going to tell you stuff like, hey, there's no market for this, right? And I don't want to see books that there's just niche markets for never be published.
Yeah.
So again, like, these are valuable services. People have a right to charge what they charge. People should feel good about paying that money, but
Right.
it's just like any other hobby, right? There's a balance between completely cheaping out and doing a bunch of crap, buying a bunch of crap, versus spending top dollar and limiting the scope of your stuff, right? And that's something that people have to decide for themselves. Like if you play guitar, the right operating point is probably somewhere in between. You just buy a bunch of really crappy effects and really crappy Chinese guitars and a cheap audio interface and never get good and just record crap on one end, and then like on the other end you buy the top of the line of everything, but you can only afford like one guitar, like a super fancy guitar. You can't afford an amp, you can't afford any effects. The maybe the optimal operating point is somewhere in between. Especially if you're a person who feels like you've got a lot of books in you, which I think most people who write do. If you only have one book, and it's like, this is your book, and I want it to be the best it can, go for it. But if your plan is I'm going to write a series, your first book is probably at best going to sell a few hundred copies. So if you pay $1,000 to have it edited, you're not going to make that money back right away.
Right.
And then to get it to sell more, you're going to probably have to put out a second book in the series, which is never going to sell as many copies as the first book. So you're going to put out the second book, and then you're going to sell more copies of the first book. And if the combined total of the combined amount of profit that you get from the second wave of sales from people buying your first book and second book, when the second book comes out, doesn't add up to the cost of whatever cost to publish the second book, then you're behind more, right?
Editing is one of those things to consider. How much do you want to invest in one particular book, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to invest nothing and be able to put out tons and tons and tons of books as much as you want, and maybe they're not as high quality? Or do you want to invest top dollar and put out this book that probably will not ever make back that money?
Or somewhere in between.
Maybe
you pay for developmental editing for the first one, make sure it's really good, then you take what you learned on that one, and then you just do beta reading or self-edit the second one. Maybe you have to pay for it a couple times till you really feel like you're confident in what you're doing. But if you think that, in my opinion, nobody's guaranteed to make money at this. It's hard. And I think if you're going into this thinking, I'm going to have expenses of $1,500 to publish each book that I put out, I think it's gonna take a long time to break even, unless you get lucky. Again, if it's your hobby, go for it. But because I mean, if you just think about it, right? So say you're selling, say you put your first book out, and let's say you even price the ebook at $5, which I wouldn't recommend doing for your first book. Some people try to publish and sell ebooks for $7 or $10.
Yeah. Yep.
For their first book. That's ridiculous in my opinion. So say you put your first book out at $5, and you manage to sell, let's say like 300 copies, and you make a little bit over $3 on each one, and that would be $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That would be good. That would be a very strong first book. So you would break even on editing, but then you'd still have the expense of cover if you didn't make the cover yourself, and whatever you paid to get it formatted if you didn't do that yourself.
Right.
And I mean, like Brian Niemeyer said, $1,000, that's only developmental,
Mm-hmm.
not line editing.
Right.
And I bet it would be at least another 500, if not another 1,000 for line editing.
Well, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier, like you said about Brian Niemeyer saying, like, take this one back to the drawing board.
Mm-hmm.
Like, developmental editing is should be early enough in the process to do serious course correcting, or saying, hey, maybe you need to set this one aside for a while and come back to it. Do you want to spend $1,000 that early in the process?
Well, I mean,
then, like,
can you pay for developmental editing for an outline? I mean, is that something that people really do?
I don't think so, not generally.
So
but the idea is developmental editing is several steps away from a finished product.
Yeah, so when you say early in the process, you mean even though the draft is done, there's still a lot of work to be done to get it done. Yeah.
A lot of indie authors, I feel, think that once they have a complete manuscript, they're very close.
Yeah. And they might be.
Sure.
It's just, and again, like, I'm not saying that you need to take this back to the drawing board. Is it the valid result of developmental editing? It's just, how much margin do you have? And I mean, even if money was no object, right? Say you could pretty reliably release a book and sell several thousand copies, then it doesn't really matter how much this costs, right? If you're selling, if you can sell several thousand copies of a book when you put it out, you're making, in terms of money, you're making 20,
right. But as long as we're talking about developmental editing in terms of money, I'm saying like there's a wide range of outcomes.
Yeah, but what I was gonna go there is, like, even if you could do that, then it's still time, right? Like if you get your book edited and the outcome is, hey, this really needs serious rework, then that's a lot of time that needs to be spent to fix it. And it would almost be better if there was some kind of service that could be, you could pay for to get sort of set of eyes in your outline before you even took it too far. And that kind of service could be less expensive too, because it wouldn't take so much time to read.
Yeah.
Maybe you could even do something like, here's my outline, and like, here's the first 2 chapters and here's the last 2 chapters.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, you can read it first, and then maybe after you read it and take your own notes, then you can read some notes that I've prepared for kind of annotating, like how some sort of, maybe threads that I'm planning on putting in the middle are getting wrapped up here in the last chapters and stuff like that. That seems to me like that could be a more effective, useful service for people.
If you are good at, you feel confident in your abilities to write the beginning and middle, but not the end, or the middle and end, but not the beginning.
Yeah.
Like to do those parts that you feel confident about, and then bring them to a developmental editor.
Yep.
Who wouldn't charge you as much as they would for like a full manuscript, and then they
Yeah.
could give you kind of like a direction. Or I think that the biggest difference between a developmental editor and like say a beta reader, which is what a lot of indies do,
Yep.
it is someone who can say not just, hey, I think you need something here, or I didn't feel this, I feel like this is missing.
Yeah.
Is to be able to make concrete suggestions.
Yeah. And maybe the ability to make concrete suggestions comes from some kind of professional or educational experience, right?
Right.
You have a degree of some kind, or you have professional experience doing this, versus beta readers are just kind of more like getting the opinion of the type of people who would read your book.
Yeah.
What I was going to say though too is a lot of established indie authors don't really use developmental editors.
Right.
They mainly do like kind of line editing for clarity. People who have really big fan bases will do kind of like a pre-beta reader,
Alpha reader type stuff.
yeah, and like to fans of their series who will help them catch internal consistency issues and things like that. So I mean that could be part of your plan too, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to sort of take off and make money, you know, maybe you pay for developmental editing for the first couple of books, but you kind of have a plan to phase out, or maybe like the first of a series, right? But your plan is over the course of the series to put out books and put them out fast enough at low enough cost that you could start making money back.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, I mean, what I don't want to see is I don't want to see people spend a ton of money thinking they're going to get it back, and then never get it back, and then burn out and stop putting stuff out. Like I would really hate to see people think, oh, if I just keep paying, you know, $1,000 a book for all of the books in this series, eventually it's going to make money because it's worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, I'm sorry, but that's just not how it works.
Right.
And I would hate to have that happen. And I kind of know some people that that's happened to. There used to be people who were like around Adam's writing. Adam Lane Smith used to have a Slack with some different people in it.
Mm-hmm.
And there used to be some guys who put out a few books, and they had paid out the wazoo for covers that were kind of like not that great.
Mm-hmm.
And they just never took off. And that doesn't mean that those books were bad.
Right.
It just means that they overextended themselves. And, you know, if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, loose money to spend on stuff like that could be a real kind of hobby ending.
Yeah.
Really kind of gut punch to spend that kind of money and then just have it never take off, never make it back.
Yeah.
It's easy to listen to these writing podcasts and be like, oh yeah, if I check all these boxes, then my book's going to take off. And, you know, if you check all those boxes, yeah, you're going to be ahead of 95% of the people who are putting stuff out. But there's so much stuff that none of that stuff is a guarantee that it'll really take off.
That's the biggest thing for me with editing is I want to be able to support indies, but I really just wonder if I'm actually being a help, or if I'm just laying a financial weight that's gonna be that sort of ball and chain that sinks someone's hobby, someone's cool thing that they're doing, just because it can't take off.
Well, and that's the challenge with this, I think, right? So kind of stepping back away from just talking about editing, but kind of to the bigger picture is, you know, I think a lot of the sort of fights that we've had with people about this have been about, you know, what is success, right? everybody is going to have a different definition of what success looks like. I think a very easy way to measure success is does it actually make money, right? And you could look at, does it make money such that I make a little bit of money after I pay for all the expenses of publishing? Another thing you could look at is, does it make money including kind of paying myself for the time of writing the book? So like if I pay myself $30 an hour to write my book, do I make money? Do I make money beyond that?
Yeah.
Right? Or do I, how many copies do I have to sell to break even doing that?
Yeah.
By that definition, almost nobody in our circle of authors that you review are successful.
Yeah.
So like if that's the definition that you have, then we're basically idiots wasting our time. The people who are successful by that metric tend to really look down on people who are not successful by that metric. I think that's a fair thing to say. I think that's a fair generalization to make.
Yeah.
So given that most of the people that you review are not successful in that way, we obviously believe that there's some other kind of definition of success.
Yeah, and that goes back to like the definition of that worthwhile.
Yeah.
What makes it worthwhile to invest in editing that isn't going to automatically make your book sell thousands of copies more.
Yep. And other expenses too. So
like
other
covers, visual art, promotional stuff.
Yep. Print formatting.
Yeah.
There's way more options as far as print formatting now than there were a few years ago. There's way more tools that let you do it for free and do a decent job with it. So that's kind of not as much of an issue anymore. I think there's just better tools in general where formatting isn't as much of a cost. Yeah. Although I still think a lot of people don't do it carefully, and it kind of shows. And I wish people would have a little bit more care in that. Art, like cover designs. AI art is a thing now, so if you want to do that, if you want to get decent cover art without spending money, you can. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to what does success look like for you, and how much money do you want to / have to spend on it? And what I think I want to do is I want to encourage people to, I would encourage people to do things in such a way that if they do encounter monetary success, that they're ready to capitalize on it, right?
Yeah.
So they've set the pieces in place, like if you write a first in a series that people really like and it takes off, be ready to write the second one, right? But one of the cool things about this is that you don't have to, that doesn't have to be your goal. You can write a book and you can think, you yourself can learn about editing and think about it yourself and get beta readers to read it and get their feedback and do a developmental edit yourself.
Yeah. One thing that really helps with self-developmental editing is reading.
Yep.
If you're reading quality stuff, if you're reading the things that are in your genre, you get a feel for what the expectations of your readers are.
Yep.
And that can really help with understanding things like pacing and the steps that your readers are expecting in, say, like a romantic arc or whatever.
Yeah, if you can identify and I think if you want to try to sell your book, and by sell I mean honestly just get people to read it, whether you're charging for it or not, you need to know comps, right? Like what other books is it like, and then you should be reading those books and seeing what those books do to make sure that you're satisfying people's expectations, or if you're not, you kind of know how you're subverting them or breaking them.
If you're not going to meet readers' expectations, then you need to market it slightly differently.
Yeah.
You need to set reader expectations. If they are approaching your book with a certain set of expectations and that falls through, that's poor marketing.
Yeah, but the point is that you can learn how to do a lot of this yourself.
Yeah.
In a way that makes this something that's feasible to do without having to be monetarily successful in terms of like turning a profit.
Yeah.
Right? You can learn about cover design. You can learn about formatting. It takes time, yes, but so does writing a book.
Right.
Another thing I wanted to say about editing, I think something that might be useful to people who maybe can't afford developmental editing is, write your book without going back and editing it over and over and revising it while you're writing it. Just write it, then be done with it and set it aside for like even a few months and then come back to it with fresh eyes. I wish I would have done that with my books rather than editing them immediately after finishing them and putting them out, because I was kind of anxious to put them out and see if they sold, is just set on it for a while. And if you have a pipeline, I think it seems to me like most people who are doing this have a lot of books in them. Put it out, start outlining and planning the next book and stuff, but set it aside for a while and then come back.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you that would work better than you editing it as you go. And if you come back to it with fresh eyes, I think you yourself can have a critical eye towards your own stuff. I think a lot of people seem to think, and again, like not saying that editors don't provide a service, I think a lot of people think editing is important because it's like they believe that they can't be critical about their own work.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, maybe that's something that some people struggle with. I think you can learn to be critical about your own work.
Yeah.
I think people should learn how to be critical of their own stuff, right? You shouldn't. I mean, it's good to get feedback from the outside, but you should be able to assess your own work and recognize the strengths and weaknesses of it.
Yeah.
You shouldn't need to go to somebody else to be able to get a critical look at your work.
Yeah.
And that's a skill. I think that's a skill that you can learn.
Yeah. So doing your own developmental editing by giving the manuscript a break, coming back to it with fresh eyes, actively reading as part of research, right? Like this is something that you do as an author, and then like beta readers that can help too. I wasn't trying to dismiss beta readers as a viable way to get good feedback on that kind of stuff. Just be aware that beta readers are not necessarily going to give you concrete, constructive ways to fix things.
Yeah.
It's going to be up to you, and choose your beta readers carefully so that you can trust that they're not just going to be saying things like, yeah, I loved it, right?
Yeah. But also, I mean, don't choose beta readers that don't like the genre that you're writing in, or are only going to give only critical feedback.
Right.
I feel like there is a tendency when it comes to writing. Everybody wants to hear that their stuff is good, right? You don't want to hear you don't want to hear from, nobody likes to hear that, your work has problems.
Right.
But I think at the same time, especially in the indie sphere, there's this kind of, I'm seeing this kind of like sort of realization that maybe, it's like, we haven't done enough to edit or whatever. And the knee-jerk reaction is, we're in this little town here that looks like there's a lot of Amish and Mennonite people, so I'm just enjoying looking around here. Look at that place.
There's a sort of knee-jerk reaction to just embrace criticism on any level.
Yeah, like and I mean, it makes sense for editors to do that because that's their bread and butter, and I'm not begrudging that. If you have that ability and you want to offer that as a service, then you're free to argue that that's important.
Yeah.
But I do think that one of the strengths of indie stuff is the ability to sort of be a little bit on the unpolished, rough, weird side of things, and I worry about too much deference to criticism to smoothing that over.
Right. I would say a good beta reader should be able to say concretely what they thought was good.
Yeah.
Not just bad things. And not just, I thought it was good.
Yeah.
If, like, I always tell people, like, leaving a review and all you say is, I liked it, that's great. But, like, that's not a beta reader.
Yeah.
You want more of a carefully thought out response when you are supposed to be giving feedback to somebody.
Yeah. But just because somebody criticizes something doesn't mean that you have to fix it.
Right.
Right. If there's an important theme or aspect to your work that you feel is important and people who read it are like, oh, that's weird, I kind of don't like that, that doesn't mean that you have to fix it.
Right.
Or change it. They just might not like that aspect of it. And I think, again, I worry that too much deference to criticism will sort of have a chilling effect on the qualities that I think make indies good.
Yeah.
Almost, this is a whole nother conversation that might be kind of fun to talk about sometime, but I've been kind of getting into comics lately, and I've been watching Cartoonist Kayfabe a lot, and they talk a lot about different people in comics, and they kind of have an appreciation for some of the more unpolished stuff as well as the polished stuff, and they are critical of Todd McFarlane a lot as a writer because he's not really like a writer by education, and he's kind of often critically panned as a writer. But something that they've mentioned is some of his writing is almost kind of like outsider art, or like outsider art or folk art, and I think you run the risk of taking something interesting in the sort of like outsider sense, where it's like this person maybe doesn't have the best handle on the craft, but they bring this weird energy to things, and they aren't afraid. Maybe like Todd McFarlane kind of, he tackles some subjects in a really ham-fisted way that maybe like a better writer would be more nuanced about.
Sure.
But his sort of ham-fistedness is kind of compelling because you can see his personal passion for that.
He's genuine
Yeah.
as an author.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are like exactly
Yeah.
things that we
Yeah.
love about indie.
Yeah. So like one example of this is like one of Todd McFarlane's big things is like he hates child abuse. So he just will frequently write stories where you have like these horrible child abusers who just get like horribly killed or things, and it's like it's not a nuanced story at all, but it's like very consistent with him as a person, right? Like he has this message and it comes out in his art.
Yep.
Now, could his craft be better? Yeah, but there's a balance there.
Yeah.
And
if I could say something sort of related to that.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to pick on Brian Niemeyer. Like
Yeah.
we've said, right? Like we believe that he does a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And that he knows what he's talking about. But he really harps on like sentence level things.
Yeah.
And I've seen him do those sort of pick apart a sentence posts.
Yeah.
And I have a very, very different
Yeah, I don't like that.
approach to editing.
Yeah.
Like I come from a writing tutor background. Like in college, I took classes in order to be a writing tutor, and the thing that they teach you is like you can't write it for them.
Mm-hmm.
You can make suggestions and you can guide them, but ultimately they're the writer, and you have to be okay with their decisions, because like don't get overly invested, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to be aware that there are different ways to say things.
Mm-hmm.
What I would recommend for writers is to read, right?
Yeah.
Until you find the type of writing that you enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
and then work to craft on your craft so that your art is satisfying and fulfilling to the level that you were hoping for, right?
Yeah.
We encourage people to get better, right? Like that's
Yeah.
not, but I don't think line editing is necessarily the way to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you really, really risk editing out the author's voice.
Yep. And I mean it sort of goes both ways, right? If the sentence level is too clunky, then people aren't going to read it.
Right.
But at the same time, if the ideas aren't interesting, people aren't going to read it.
Yeah.
So, and it's not, the two don't have to fight. It's not like, I'm not saying that clunky sentences mean unique ideas or vice versa. They're two different axes, but it's just kind of two examples of something where I think you should be careful about criticism, because in both of those cases there's downsides, right? If the interesting weird ideas get rounded off or your voice gets lost, then that's, in my opinion, that's bad.
Yeah. I agree.
It takes a lot of skill and probably a lot of time and thought, and probably feedback from different people, or a good sense of self-criticism to differentiate and to know where the line is there. But I think it's fair to say that those are things that you should be careful about when getting criticism of your work.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, again, it kind of comes down to what your purpose is and what success looks like,
Yeah.
right? If your definition of success is I want to make money writing, then you might want to take criticism about reader expectations and, readers of this genre might find this theme weird or distasteful more seriously, to the point where you would edit that out or remove it. But if your goal is, or your definition of success is, I have this story and this theme is very important to the story in my opinion, and I want to put out the best version of this story with that theme intact that I can, then sales be damned.
Mm-hmm.
Then make that be your goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then don't get upset when it doesn't resonate with readers of that genre. Maybe you have to work harder to find readers, or maybe readers don't like it, but you just made the best version of that story that you could.
Yep. Yeah. I'm just gonna start this. And
Okay.
then we can just talk about whatever we want.
Sure. So did you find anything in your
People are fighting about Iron Age. Somebody said that Iron Age was a cult.
most boring cult in the world? There's no secrecy.
There's no. He invited people, if you need help, contact me. It's like, what are you talking about?
Do you need help, getting out of the Iron Age? Escaping the Iron Age cult that's trying to hold you back?